in the Board of Alders Chamber located at 165 Church Street, second floor, New Haven, Connecticut, to hear and act on the following items. OR-2023-0017, an ordinance amendment approving the amendment to section 18-71-18-90 of the City of New Haven Code of Ordinances, Noise Control Ordinance. Per Honorable Ellen Kubo, Chair, attest Honorable Michael Smart, City Town Clerk. These items are on file and available in the office of the City Clerk, room 202 at 200 Orange Street, New Haven, Connecticut, 06510. For accessibility related accommodations, please call 203-946-7651 or 203-946-8582. Public testimony and comment may also be submitted via email to publictestimony@newhavencity.gov by 2 p.m. on the day of the meeting. This meeting may be viewed on the Board of Alders YouTube page. I just want to welcome everyone to tonight's committee meeting, and I'm going to begin by taking the roll. Alder Ferrara Santana.
Alder Ferrara Santana, Ward 13.
Alder Frillo.
Richard Furlow, Vice Chair, Ward 28.
Alder Morrison is not with us yet. Alder Marchand.
Adam Marchand, Alder of the 25th Ward.
Alder E. Rodriguez.
Alder Evelyn Rodriguez, Ward 4.
And Alder Saban.
Alder Eli Saban, Ward 7.
And I am Ellen Kubo. I represent Ward 8, and I am here. So to begin this evening, I want to just quickly recognize colleagues that are in this chamber with us this evening. My colleagues from 17th and 18th Ward, Alder Punzo, Alder DeCola, as well as the Alder Ward 6, Alder Rodriguez, and Alder Ward 14, Alder Miller. Thank you for being here this evening. So at this time, I'm going to ask that the makers of the item come forward to begin their presentation. Good evening. And
Good evening.
hello. And if you would please want to take a seat, get comfortable, and please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is Patricia King. I'm the Corporation Counsel. I live at 32 Vista Terrace in New Haven. I have with me Attorney Earl J. Vignello.
I live at 600 Hawkins Road in Orange, Connecticut, I'm Assistant Corporate Chief.
Chief Carl Jacobson, 15 Westerly Road, New Haven, Connecticut.
Brian McDermott, 830 Woodward Avenue, New Haven, Connecticut.
Thank you so much. Please proceed.
Thank you. So my plan for tonight is to give a brief overview of the changes that are in this proposed amendment. And I would note that there is, which you have just received, another proposed amendment. I apologize for the somewhat inelegant rollout here. It's an important ordinance and we wanted to do our best to get it right. So once I'm done, Lieutenant McDermott has a PowerPoint, a short PowerPoint to illustrate the reasons for the support of the New Haven Police Department. And Chief Jacobson is also here to address any other issues or questions that you might have. So this amendment was prompted by legislation, House Bill 5255, that was passed by the Connecticut legislature, that allows municipalities to impose increased penalties for noise created by external speakers attached to motor vehicles. This is basically the situation. I think you're all aware of the motor vehicles that gather with the big speakers either on top of their cars or sticking out of their trunks or otherwise attached to motor vehicles and make excessive amounts of noise and pose disturbances for residents in New Haven and beyond. The new statute allows municipalities to seize speakers attached to motor vehicles when there are ordinance violations and provides for significantly higher fines. $1,000 for a first violation, $1,500 for a second violation, and $2,000 for subsequent violations. And the ordinance also adds a condition for violation that if the noise is clearly audible from 100 feet, that noise would also be in violation of the ordinance. The initial submission was 50 feet, which I had mistakenly used as Hartford's standard, but Hartford uses the 100 feet standard. So I amended this submission to increase the distance from 50 to 100 feet. And the definition of loud amplification device in the ordinance has been expanded to include external speakers attached to a motor vehicle, which is the subject of the new legislation. The ordinance allows the city to seize speakers and provides a way for an owner to get their seized speaker back. Similar to the process for dirt bikes that are seized. We understand that the police, Lieutenant McDermott will discuss this. Many of the offenders here are from out of state, so that in the event that an offender does not pay the fine, the city can take advantage of a statute that would allow the fine to be converted to a civil judgment. Not saying we would do this in all the cases, but it's certainly an avenue that would allow us to put some teeth into these increased fines, especially for out-of-state offenders. So overall, this new proposal is targeted at those offenders who employ large external speakers to broadcast loud music or other noise, including in situations such as the competition-like gatherings we've seen at Long Wharf, also in areas of Fairhaven, and on the New Haven-North Haven border. Hopefully this ordinance will be passed and will serve as a deterrent to this type of behavior by many motorists who, with the significantly increased fines and penalties that can be imposed. We also recognize that excessive noise from sources other than motor vehicles is a quality of life issue for residents in other areas of the city. We look forward to working with the board on this issue. And finally, I do want to thank Misty Mazza from Legislative Services, who was extremely helpful to me in getting the technical aspects of this submission in order, because, you know, I'm not the best with Microsoft Word, and she was very patient and very helpful to me. So I will now turn this over to the members of the New Haven Police Department, and Lieutenant McDermott has a short PowerPoint that he can present, unless the chief has something.
Oh, yeah. Good evening, Chair, Vice Chair, Board. We appreciate you hearing us on this. Attorney King hit the nail on the head when she said that these loud amplified devices bring people to areas which not always end up in positive results. So to be able to cite for that and also seize the speakers, it's going to cut down a lot of different things like racing, blocking roads, just a lot of the quality of life issues that we're encountering in New Haven today. And of course, you've heard it, it's all over the state. I think we've done a good job recently pushing it out of New Haven, but now it's everywhere and it's going to come back around here. But the noise has always been here. And I would say that some of these start as drag racing and everything else, but the last one we had ended up in someone being shot. So it's real important to cut that down by eliminating the noise, eliminating the speakers. We've identified 4 to 8 different people from out of town, all from out of town, that come into the city with this type of equipment. And if we're able to cite and seize, even just a small number, will make a huge difference in the quality of life in the city, but also shutting down the potential of having violent incidents. So I just want to start off with that, and I wanted to thank Attorney King and her colleague and her team for all the work they did on this. And my Lieutenant McDermott, I'm going to let him do the talking because he's done a great job on this as well. So.
Thank you, Chief. Good evening, Board of Alders. Just would like to thank Attorney King and Corporation Counsel for all the work that they've put in for drafting this proposal. Just because some of these issues aren't familiar to necessarily everyone in the city, and some of the concerns we had from some of the people in the subcommittee prior to this meeting, we prepared this PowerPoint to address some of these issues. The three biggest objections that we heard in the subcommittee are: will this ordinance amendment only concern Long Wharf and Morris Cove? How can the police determine 100 feet of the offense distance? And will increased fines be used to harass citizens? Just to start to paint the picture of exactly what we're dealing with here, some of you may already be familiar with this. But this is a picture of some of the high-end versions of what we've been dealing with. They've backed these vehicles, as you can see, right up as close to the water as they can. As the chief mentioned, some of them come from out of state, as far away as New Jersey. They come down 91 from Massachusetts. These are expensive systems. What you're looking at right here can cost in excess of $10,000. And as you can see, the owners of these vehicles have sacrificed any trunk or passenger space in order to accommodate this. The noise from these speakers is significant enough, and some of the citizens of these areas here can back me up on this. They create noise strong enough to rattle the windows of homes on Woodward Avenue, Neeland Avenue, Townsend, and all the side streets in between. They like to choose the Long Wharf area because they understand, we have a big harbor here in the city, and they use the harbor to bounce the sound off. I've received complaints from East Haven and even as far away as Brantford that the noise has been audible from there, which it's mind blowing, but it's what's been happening. So in addition to that, on the next slide here, we have another example. Not everybody has such a high-end system, but we actually have a citizen over on Poplar Street who's been installing kind of homemade devices like this, and that's an older photo, but he's actually progressed in his skills, and what's displayed on the roofs of these vehicles now is even a little more significant than that. This can still wake up an entire neighborhood. Is powerful enough. This is actually from a photo from an arrest that we made back in the fall of 2001, back when we had the older fines. One of the things that we encountered when we were dealing with this enforcement, the chief was good enough to give us a detail just to address this based on the complaints. And I went out with some of the motor units and some of the other officers. These individuals started on Long Wharf. We kept getting the noise complaints throughout the city. I had certain citizens calling my cell phone directly. It was actually very helpful to pinpoint where the noise was coming from in real time. And we actually located them on the dead end of Poplar Street over near River, by the Quinnipiac River, and that was also creating some noise there. So one of the things we've experienced, and I think it speaks to their frame of mind and their motivation for this, is even when we push them off Long Wharf, they seek out other areas where they can amplify their sound, whether it's through the water or through a higher altitude. Just back this fall, I was working overtime as a shift commander, and we were getting some kind of confusing calls from both the East Haven and North Haven Police Department. We received calls from East Haven where citizens were convinced it was coming from the Walmart parking lot on Fox and Boulevard. We sent officers there who confirmed that the Walmart parking lot was empty. I went out there to confirm it myself, and that was the case. Getting some more calls, we were able to determine it was coming from a moving vehicle that was traveling at some of the higher altitudes in the area up upon the tops of hills on the northeast corner of the city where East Haven, North Haven, and New Haven all meet together. So it's not simply just a Long Wharf problem. That's their preferred spot because it gives them the best amplification. But if we thwart that, they just find someplace else. So anywhere with water or high altitude could be susceptible to this. As far as, next slide, please. I apologize. I already started to address the fact that this isn't just a Long Wharf and a Morris Cove problem, but one of the other things that we're dealing with is the fact that these calls can inundate our PSAP center, our call center. We've had numerous complaints that people call the non-emergency line, especially during the hours that this is going on, and simply can't get through to our dispatcher because our dispatch is overwhelmed with these calls. It doesn't always show in the statistics because just for getting through the calls at a reasonable speed, and oftentimes PSAP will realize, okay, we're getting like 50 calls for the same incident holding on the board, and they stop entering them as new calls. So that also creates a problem, and we're looking to use one to clear up our phone lines, and also to have the officers that get sent to this, spend their time addressing other issues or in proactive patrols. Coming up to the next one of the big questions we had, previously we have relied on decibel meters to determine the amount of noise. This requires the department acquiring additional equipment. It requires them to be properly calibrated, serviced, maintained. We already all wear, and the chief's wearing his right now, and forgive me, I put mine in the car so I didn't accidentally activate here. But we all wear body cameras, and these record audio as well. It's amazingly clear. They record conversations. If I were speaking to you even without the benefit of this microphone, you could hear me as clear as a bell with everything that I'm saying. The plan is to use these cameras to determine the distance. Simply, we go to the source of the complaint. With the body camera, we document the fact that the noise is audible on the camera. We document the location of the complaint. Then go to the source of the noise, document that location with the camera, and obviously you can hear the intensity of the increased noise on the recording. Anything from Apple Maps, Google Maps, these are all verified sources of determining distance. We've used I used the example in the subcommittee of, just in the hill, because it's got a nice straight road there of Howard Avenue. If there's noise from Howard and Spring and it's audible at Howard and Putnam, all we need to do is we can either use the street signs, or we can even use easy landmarks. Like if it's audible, if it's coming from the firehouse on Howard Avenue and it's audible at Roberto Clemente's school right there, that's actually 1,000 feet, give or take. But we can use these landmarks and these streets to determine exactly where it is. Some of the questions I've had as well is, just like we do with our speed enforcement, I used to supervise the motor unit. The speed limit throughout the city is 25 miles an hour. Typically, if we get a speeding ticket, it's not for somebody going 26 or 27 miles an hour. We account for the margin of error. However, if you're doing 40 miles an hour and a 25, you're probably going to get a ticket if we're doing speed enforcement. We intend to enforce this in the same way. We're not looking to get into ticky-tack debates over the distance, whether it's 99 feet, whether it's 101 feet, but if it's 180 feet, clearly that's in violation, and it's obviously disturbing the neighborhood in that area. I actually got ahead of myself on the slide here, so we can move past that one. And lastly, obviously, anytime that there's something like this designed to increase a fine, I did hear some concerns about the citizens. And one thing that we want to make clear is, we're not looking to give anybody who has a backyard party, who maybe their immediate neighbors call and complain. We're not looking to use it for that. We're not looking to use it if you happen to pull up at a stoplight and someone's maybe enjoying their personal car stereo a little bit too much and it shakes your window a bit. As the pictures in here describe, this is clearly obvious intentional behavior by repeat offenders who come to the city to do nothing else other than this activity. So this is what we're trying to target and what we're trying to eliminate. At this point, I will open it up for any questions.
Are there any questions from committee?
I have a couple, Madam Chair, just preliminary. And I saw my colleague writing, so I think I may bounce off of some of the questions. It's more like 50 feet, right? Or
It's now 100 feet. It was initially 50 feet in the opening draft. We want to be able to mirror what Hartford did. The state law allows us to go as low as 50 feet. We've opted to go with 100 feet.
oh, that's what you said at the beginning.
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
I thought
we
the
did,
numbers-
as I said, there were some concerns at city plan, so, and I looked at Hartford's again, and they have 100 feet, so
Yeah,
we tried to alleviate that.
First, I should say thank you for your presentation. Excuse me. Thank you for your presentation and for the slide. I don't really have any questions with the noise and the spaceships that are there. But I am just kind of curious on how you'll be able to enforce part of the ordinance. Because this is majoring on sound emitting from cars, but we have a whole ordinance that deals with noise, which is also noise in residential neighborhoods. And so my only, not really a concern, but a question is, why not just enforce the whole ordinance and deal with sound from establishments, houses that are too loud, in neighborhoods, cars that are too loud? Just let's deal with it all.
Well, if I could respond in part, this ordinance was targeted to implement the new statute for the specific problem that the Lieutenant McDermott and Chief Jacobson have described, the large external speakers attached to motor vehicles, and gave us the ability, I should say, to impose significant fines and seize the speakers. It doesn't, this ordinance was not intended to affect in any way the ability of the police to enforce the noise ordinance as it exists. So, that wasn't the purpose of this amendment. And I'm sure the police can address the enforcement questions, because it is a quality of life issue. There's no doubt about that everywhere. But the police can address the enforcement question beyond that. But I did want to just point out the sort of narrow purpose of this amendment to at least attempt to target this particular type of violation.
Because right now it is very difficult to have noise violation enforced in residential areas from private property. I get a lot of calls for private property, 10, 11 o'clock. And I understand the police just cannot come out for every noise violation because we have other serious things that are going on in the city that take priority. My question is, now we have this coming, which is a lot more complex to enforce than stopping in front of someone's house or restaurant where the noise is blaring and it's obvious. And now you're doing measurements and cameras and Google Maps and chasing the car down, perhaps. And so maybe there's not a real answer to that. Maybe this is more discussion than but I'm concerned about the noise in general, all the noise, not just the noise that's emanating from the cars, because this is part of the noise ordinance. We are dealing with the cars today, but this still falls under the noise ordinance.
Yeah, so, if you're done.
Yes, yeah.
So I would say it's a good point. We still do get calls. We still do go to residential houses a lot, knock on the door, ask them to turn it down. When we leave, we know they probably turn it back up. But I think this is a way to roll out squashing the bigger bug, so to speak. This noise, I mean, I've heard it in Westville from Lowell. It's crazy. So we want to get the officers to this mindset and operate here. As we expand the police department, get more numbers in the police department, we have 20, almost 30 people in training right now. I can't wait till September, they all come out. And it gives us the force multiplier to go to all those houses and knock on the doors. And especially because your time of that noise is 11, 12 o'clock on a Saturday night. Unfortunately, depending on the night, you could have 6 officers at a crime scene. You could have 6 officers at a traffic fatality. You have 12 officers downtown in the bar area to make sure people don't fight. So we're bleeding ourselves thin, but I think we needed to go after the biggest thing that's spreading the noise throughout the city and then causing gatherings which cause other crimes to occur, whether it be drag racing or, like I said, it ended up in a shots fired. So we're going to start with this. I think my vision down the road is all these noise complaints, and we're working with Director Vitale. He's been great. He's doing a lot of great things in PSAP. That we're on Mondays going to get that list of all those houses, and the district managers are going to be in a position, again, most district managers are covering 2 districts right now, but that's only temporary. We're gonna get to a point where the district managers are gonna follow up on normal neighborhood noise complaints and be able to say to somebody, listen, we've come 4 times in a week or in a month or whatever, or we've gotten 10 complaints in 2 months. Next time it's gonna be a fine. Because we wanna give that discretion to the city residents. Where here, I can tell you 9 out of 10 are not, I think 10 out of 10 are not city residents. So we wanna get this going first. This may be able to, and it sounds complicated, but with these cameras, it's amazing. Like, they can literally hear the music, go to the source of it, go back, and boom, they have it. Where before it was a decibel reader, a distance, a lot more complicated. If this system works to the way that I think it will, that will also apply to lower end noise as well, and allow us to be able to attack the whole problem. But we got to start at the biggest fish, so to speak.
I do have just one, thank you. I do have just one more question. 2 more questions. Do I hear 3? Would this include bicycles? There's a lot of bikes that have the boom boxes that you see riding throughout. I've seen them through downtown. Some are bikes and some are, or maybe they're electric bikes. It's hard to tell.
Well, I've seen some motorcycles and bigger bikes that are equipped with loud music, almost, a smaller replica of that. It could include that. Bicycle with a boombox, it's not putting out, it seems like it's putting out that decibel level, but it's really not. But that's something we need to approach too at some point as well. But I don't think the noise is coming out even close to what you're getting out of these.
And my final question for now is, why wouldn't this be considered distracted driving?
Because they're not driving. Well, when they are driving, we could cite them for that. Funny story, I was driving on 95 on a Friday night, Saturday night, and a car went by me blaring the music. It almost caused me to drive off the road. And I called it in, but it actually went by New Haven, which I was happy. But you're right, it could be, well, you're not distracted driving is about the driver being distracted. It could be reckless endangerment where you're distracting other drivers. But you're right. So if it is a mobile one and we can prove that it's not distracting neighborhoods, it would have to actually distract other drivers. So
So
we could probably prove that. So
if I'm driving and I'm driving one of these cars and the music is extremely loud because they're blasting it out of the space shuttle, then I would think that would be considered a distraction. I am causing a distraction and I'm also being distracted because I can't even hear emergency vehicles.
well, I like that point. We'll try to cite somebody and see where it goes.
All I need is a camera and a badge.
And the crazy part about it is a lot of these guys wear earplugs. So that when they are driving around, they're just bothering you and they can hear the next day.
So would you give them 2 tickets, one for distracted driving and one for violating the noise ordinance?
It's very interesting. We may do that just to see if it flies.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And if I might, Alder Furlow, to your point, I just wanted to note that I did have motorized recreational vehicles included in the original submission, but because when I reviewed the new statute, it only applies to motor vehicles as defined by the state statute, and motorized recreational vehicles do not fall under that. We took them out of this ordinance to the extent that I don't know that they are really the cause of a lot of the problem, but I did want to explain why that was done there.
Thank you for that explanation. One question, what if the loud amplification device is not attached to the vehicle? What do we do then?
Well, it's it'll have to be attached some way for either power or sound, or it should be attached some way. I mean, if not, we would just take it, ask anyone, whose is this? I would be shocked at $10,000 speaker, they would say, it's not mine. But I mean, we would take it and ask whose it is and try to go that way.
The other thing that I've seen is when they decide to detach the speakers from the vehicle themselves, they are hooked up to the car as a power source with a cable. And just again, to put it in perspective of what we're dealing with here, we're not talking about a cable. We're talking about a cable like you would see for the concerts on the Green. We're talking about it, right, exactly. So, I mean, if they say, oh, it's not mine, literally all we would have to do is follow the cable right to the vehicle, and that solves that pretty quick.
I see, okay, thank you very much. Alderman Marshall?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank all of you for your presentation and your work on this. It's an important issue, and I'm glad that we're taking efforts to update our ordinances to use all the tools that the state law is now allowing us to use. But you remember that I raised a few questions at the city plan meeting because I just had concerns about some practical considerations. One was about the distance, which you've addressed. Your explanation, Attorney King, was that you wanted to be consistent with Hartford. My question to you would be, has Hartford used that language? Is it, and how has it worked for them? How practical has it been for the police in Hartford to use that 100-foot away kind of language as opposed to like a decibel meter reading?
Attorney Giovanello spoke with the Corporation Council in Hartford.
They have a community court there that they regularly refer these matters to, and I got the impression that that was effective. Didn't specifically ask that about distance.
Yeah, and in speaking with the Hartford chief, I know that he said this has been helpful with what they're dealing with. They're dealing with the same type of stuff, right from ATVs right through. They actually, copied some of our ATV ordinance and ran with that as well. So we kind of share information with them all the time. They started with the cameras and the LPRs, and we kind of mimic what they're doing, and we've looked at all the different softwares they've used. But yeah, I would say he's saying that it has been successful to this point.
Thank you for that information. I'm asking this because, obviously people will challenge actions in court. And so the wording matters in the ordinance. And the wording here, I could look up here, but it's plainly audible for someone of normal hearing. Does that sound right?
That's correct.
Where did you get that wording from?
From the Hartford ordinance.
Okay.
And there is also case law, whether it's been in Connecticut, that indicated that 50 feet was an acceptable number. So, so as not to be overly vague or, would be enforceable.
And the important part is we'll play that camera in court, and hopefully it'll be plainly audible off the camera.
And in addition, the police could charge, along with the ordinance violation, other state misdemeanors like disorderly conduct or breach of peace that doesn't rely so much on that technical aspect of it, but does have its roots in causing interference, annoyance, or alarm, I think, are the terms from the statute. So.
The reason why I'm asking about this wording is because, somebody who wants to get out of consequences for violating the ordinance is going to try to look at the language and poke holes in it, right? So,
yep.
Obviously if you have a certified instrument that measures decibels, that's like a scientific calculation on a registered piece of equipment. That's different than language that might seem a little bit fuzzier in a sense, like plainly audible by a person of normal hearing. I mean, all the officers certified as being of normal hearing? They're not like super hearing people, or you see what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
I'm just worried about someone trying to get around the ordinance because maybe the wording isn't quite tight enough.
Yeah, I think it's a vagueness issue, which is probably the legal terminology that it would fall under. But as the Lieutenant McDermott and the chief have said, they have body cameras. So that certainly would be evidence in court. And then that could be used in court and testimony about the body cameras and how the distance is measured, and it could be tested in court. Certainly we are confident that it would be successful, but if it weren't, then I guess we would go back to the drawing board, which is what we would have to do. But I think that there's certainly plenty of tools that we have to work with here with the police that we could satisfy that the noise level was such that would violate the ordinance.
Do the body cameras indicate decibel levels upon playback of the original recording?
No. That would solve a big problem.
It would. It's just that somebody could argue, look, the playback feature on your body cam is 10 times as loud as the actual noise that it recorded, right? And so how does a body cam prove that it's plainly, I mean, it's recordable by a device with a sensitive microphone, but, so I'm just trying to anticipate, like, what would someone say in court to say, like, your body camera is neither a certified decibel meter, nor is it proving that it was plainly audible by someone with normal hearing, because you might have the best microphone ever manufactured on your body cam that could get a cricket from 200 meters. You see what I'm saying?
Well,
Yes.
that's why the officers will be trained to say, I'm approximately over 100 feet away. They'll talk in a normal voice. And then also throughout the recording, you will hear, the loud noise. So there'll be something else on that body camera to kind of
Create the record.
yeah, exactly.
That's
That's a good point, but that's what we're thinking of too, is that the officer will give some kind of narrative in a plain voice, and then overly you'll hear this noise. And it's a home run with these devices because they're so loud. I mean, I don't know if you've been on a long walk.
probably not ambiguous, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, and the operators of these devices, these types of vehicles with the speakers often have to wear their own hearing protection.
It's actually
So-
physically painful to stand in proximity to one of these vehicles without hearing protection.
Okay, so I appreciate the back and forth. If I may, I just have a couple more lines of inquiry. Because I want the ordinance to work.
So,
So, but it doesn't have to be a high-end audio system that's the source of the noise. It could be a muffler that's tuned a certain way. It could be a highly revving engine that produces it. Like, the ordinance amendment adds detail about the audio equipment, but if you read the draft, it says that including that equipment, but it could be anything. It could be like you have like a muscle car, and you're just revving it up. I mean, how many times have we heard people revving up their muscle cars, making huge amounts of noise? And so the 100-foot rule would still apply, no matter what the kind of noise is or the source of the noise being emitted from the car, correct?
yes,
Yeah, that's how we're interpreting it.
yes, but generally the revved up car is not something that stays in one place for a long time. You know, it moves along, and so if someone were following it or were complaining about it as it traveled for a period of time, emitting this type of noise, that would be a different story than what we're looking at.
I understand that the phenomenon that this amendment is attempting to address is, there's a picture of it right there.
Yeah.
But it has, what you're putting in there has a broader applicability than just the noise emanating from a high-end stereo system. It could be any number of things. It could just be a car. I made this remark in city plan, from a 50 feet, certain all-terrain vehicles have knobby tires. You can hear those tires, just the tread sound of a car driving at a normal speed. You can hear that from 50 feet away. 100 feet away, maybe not. But it's like, so the threshold of 100 feet, I know it's not your stated intention to start to go after people with snow tires in the summertime. But 50 feet away, you can hear those snow tires because they go, right? So the way the ordinance is written is that it's a threshold that will enable you to go after lots of different things, not just this very blatant thing.
Yeah, I think it could, but we're gonna start with this and make sure we get it down right and make sure we're doing it right. That's why we have the discretionary of the officers when you move on. I mean, this is gonna be blatant, but we could apply it to other things that we're having issues with.
Because you could almost say that if you're dealing with just this phenomenon, you could probably say a quarter mile. And that would still, or 250 feet.
Sure.
Right? So by making it 100, you're actually, once this gets nipped in the bud, now we might say that that's appropriate. We want them to have a relatively low threshold, but in my view, it's a threshold that's so far below what they're talking about. Like you could raise it by 2 or 5 times and still kept, anyway, so that's my point there. Just something for us to think about. The other thing that the city plan report says, we should think more about this issue of seizing property. right? The state law enables us to do it, but it's, anytime you deal with somebody's property, then you have to build in all sorts of due process, which I see that you have. Could you say a little bit more, Attorney King, about how you're addressing the issue of how to build in the ability to seize property, but also have protections for due process and such?
That's correct. There is an addition in this draft that would allow, similar to the dirt bike ordinance, that would allow someone to petition. They would get a written notice that they have the right to petition for the return of their speaker. They could have a hearing to determine whether the speaker was involved in a violation. It would be up to the hearing officer to determine that whether or not there was a violation. And if there were, the speaker could be forfeited, and then there's a right of appeal. And the other option, or the other possibility, I should say, is that if there were a criminal charge pending, if this were in connection with some other criminal charge, the speaker itself could be needed as evidence in the criminal case. In which case, in criminal court, there's an option for a defendant to file a motion for return of seized property. And then that would go to a judge, and a judge would decide. Oftentimes, at least back when I was doing criminal work, there was an option for the parties to agree, for example, on photographic evidence being sufficient, if the court wanted to return the evidence to the defendant, the physical evidence. So there's a process also through criminal court if there are criminal charges pending as well. So, I think given the cost of these speakers and the significance of the speakers to the activity, and it would stop if we seize the speakers. They're not going to be able to drive around to another area of town and do the same thing because they will not have the instrument with which to do it.
And there's other factors. Say they owe $9,000 on this $12,000 set of speakers. That means somebody else owns it. So we, in these cases, we've seen dirt bikes and ATVs like that. We're not paying the lien, so it's returned to them. There was another situation where the person was from out of town. They, in the hearing, they said, hey, I'll never come back to New Haven to ride this, and it's really mine, but I allowed this person to ride it, and it was returned. It's a very fair process. It's a very fair process.
Just two more quick details, Madam Chair, and then I'll yield. I thank you for your patience. When I read through the text, it mentioned the speakers being removed or towed. And so that suggested to me that this ordinance intends to make the whole vehicle seizable if the speakers are integrated into the vehicle and not easily removable. So is that your understanding of the intent of the language as well?
No, we did not intend here to seize anything but the speakers, but if the speakers are of such a size or dimension that would be, we would have to put them on a tow truck, or I don't know how the mechanics of that work, but there's not any intent here to seize the vehicle itself.
Well, if it's 1 o'clock in the morning and we can't get the speakers off, we'll take the car and then we'll allow them the opportunity to come take it off themselves or our city mechanics. Because you're gonna have situations like that.
Okay, thank you for that. That intention and clarification is helpful. The last thing I would say is my reading of the language you've put before us makes it clear that the only thing that is allowed to be seized is the offending audible device, noise emitting device. That's the only thing that's mentioned in connection with seizure. So like, you're not gonna remove someone's muffler and take it away because it's really noisy. I'm being silly here.
No.
But I just want to be super clear what your ordinance amendment actually would enable the city to seize and what it doesn't enable the city to seize.
Well, the enabling statute is restricted to external speakers attached to them.
Okay.
So that's what we are.
Yeah, and remember, we're cops. We're not taking anything apart.
Thank you for answering my questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I just want to welcome Alder Morrison and also recognize Alder Hedega is with us. And I'm now going to turn it over to Evelyn Rodriguez for questioning.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you, Attorney King, for making sure that we are up to date in reference to the ordinances and the changes. And I just have 2 questions. I have in my ward, I have Adeline Street, I have Ann Street, I have Davenport, Congress, Pollock Street, Howard Avenue, Horsey Street, Spring Street, Columbus Street, DeWitt Street. All of them had shared concerns about noise. And we have basic fundamental noise ordinances that this board has approved. I only have a concern. While I'm excited, and I think we definitely have to always be improving our ordinances, that we need to meet those orders. We need to enforce, because the residents of my ward and this entire city deserve better when it comes to the noise ordinances. I understand that we are lacking in reference to the police, but we are getting better. And so it is my hope that as we address this, because this is a big problem, that we do not forget about those fundamental ordinances, which should not go unaddressed, and this should come first. I believe that if we were to address those ordinances and meet the residents in reference to the noise that they're already dealing with on a weekend basis, and also on a daily basis, that would help a great deal. The question that I have in reference to this is that we talk about noise, education is key, and training. Will there be training and education in reference to how to deal with this equipment, and so as there not to be damage, and also where, if it needs to be stored, will it have this been considered? So those are the 3 things: education, and how do we maybe consider citing individuals, and storing, and also training.
Yeah, good question. We will be training the officers of exactly what they're supposed to do, exactly what they can take, meaning the speakers, and what they're not to take. And like I said with Alder Marshall's question, if we're not able to safely or easily get that from the car, we will tow the car and then give the person an opportunity to get the car back. We do have room in 710 Sherman Parkway that we moved many of the SWAT apparatus and the other bomb and everything else has been moved to 200 Wintergreen for the purposes of storing other like cars used in shootings and that type of thing. So we have more of an indoor area for storage. So they would start there, that we would have a storage area there. The city engineers are also building us a building in back of 200 Wintergreen for evidence specifically. So we'll have an area there because we will see more seized items and larger seized items. So we have thought about that. We do have areas put aside for that.
Thank you. And lastly, if we were to do a show and tell in reference to decibels and distance, I would see a lot more residents in here. As to the sound, for example, on Davenport Avenue, how about Ann Street residents literally feeling the vibration of music from some of the businesses over there? Just an example. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Alder Ferraro, Santana.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I was going to ask some of the same questions without belaboring the issue. I have the same concerns. My issues are not being addressed in my ward. I've spoken about it many times. The noise from residents the decimal point where my house starts to shake is not acceptable.
Point of order, Elder President, we're speaking specifically about motorized vehicles.
Well, you allowed her to speak, of my colleague, and I'm voicing my same concern.
I understand that, but my understanding of the framing of your question was about residential issues of noise.
Yeah, this is residential issues of noise.
Right, but we're speaking specifically about one particular kind of motorized vehicle with, do you have a question about the presentation or the specific ordinance in front of us?
Well, I beg to differ with you, Madam Chair. If you allow another colleague to state the question, that
Point of order.
Madam Chair, this is not appropriate. You've given your decision, and it's time to move on. I'm asking the colleague to move on. Unless she's going to appeal your decision, this is not appropriate to go back and forth with the chair.
Well, there's no reason for me to stay here further.
Alder Steven.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I have a question sort of along the lines of my colleague from Ward 25, I believe, who was asking about the scope of the ordinance. And I was just looking up the state law that we're trying to follow. And I'm a little bit confused about some of the language that Alder Martin was pointing at. So on page 77, it says, the added language says, no person shall operate a motor vehicle in such a manner as to emit noise which is plainly audible at a distance of 100 feet. So that's not, it doesn't have to be coming, the noise, as Alder Martin was saying, doesn't have to be coming from the speaker. And then, this is part of the ordinance. And then, later in the ordinance, it says that the penalty could be up to $1,000 or up to $2,000. So basically, my reading of the ordinance is that you could fine somebody up to $1,000 for operating a vehicle in such a manner as to emit noise which is plainly audible at a distance of 100 feet. Is that correct reading of the ordinance?
Yes, the increased fines would apply to noise emitted from a motor vehicle, not from the speaker in somebody's backyard or, some other source.
I think my confusion is about whether the noise is coming from the speaker or if it's coming from the vehicle in general, because again, my reading of, and this is section C on page 77, it says, and there's like there's some comma clauses in between, but if you read through the comma clauses, it just says, no person shall operate a motor vehicle in such a manner as to emit noise which is plainly audible at a distance of 100 feet. So the noise doesn't have to be coming from a speaker. It could be just the sound that the car makes. And when I just looked up the law, which is, we got a letter from Representative Paolo and Senator Looney. It's Public Act 2240. And my reading of the law, it says that the increased fines that we're trying to apply here are only for violations of, or only for statutes that regulate the operation and use of external speakers attached to a motor vehicle. So my reading of the statute is that you couldn't apply the $1,000 fine to noise that's just coming from a car, the normal operation of the car. It would have to be from speakers. Is that
Yes,
accurate?
that's the, let me just, it was in the penalty section, so if you just give me a minute.
It's just that I think that you could read the ordinance that we're voting on, or that we're considering tonight, to say that you could be fined $1,000 for noise emitted from a vehicle that is plainly audible from 100 feet. But I don't think that would be authorized under state law. the state law seems to only apply to noise coming from external speakers attached to a motor vehicle.
So the penalty provision, which is, and I don't think my page is numbered the same as yours, but it's under 18-82, subsection B. Any person who violates section 1879 of this chapter shall be fined. So that applies to the motor vehicle noise section.
Right, so this is our page 80. It says the fine is any person who violates any provision of section 18-79 may be fined up to $1,000 for first violation, etc. And then,
So that would be what the fine would apply to.
right, but then in section 18-79, which is what that penalty applies to, in section C of that section, it says, if you read through the comma clauses, it says, no person shall operate a motor vehicle in such a manner as to emit noise which is plainly audible at a distance of 100 feet. So that sounds to me like it would apply, the fine in the penalties clause would apply to a violation of that description of the
That would be
infraction.
correct. That would be correct.
And I'm just not sure that the state law authorizes us to do that. It seems to me that the state law, it says, any municipality that adopts an ordinance pursuant to section 7-148 of general statutes to regulate the operation and use of external speakers attached to a motor vehicle may prescribe a penalty up to $1,000. So it seems to me that the ordinance before us is a little bit overly broad compared to what we are authorized to do under state law. And I think that sort of gets at what Alderman Marchand was mentioning earlier about, obviously we have this issue that's going on, which is a very serious issue. And I think, we've all, as alders, one of the things we get the most calls about is noise issues. And so I think that it's maybe something that we would want to consider to increase the fines for general noise violations. I just am not sure that the penalties that we are trying to impose here are allowed under the state statute.
I'll be happy to take a look at that more closely.
Okay.
Just limit those new penalties to just amplified speakers from motor vehicles.
Right, I think that's,
I think that's so, what you're pointing out,
Right.
it's a great point.
I think that seems to me to be the intention of the state law and I think what we're trying to do here. So I think maybe we need to try to figure out how to clarify that those increased fines are for noise coming from external speakers attached to a motor vehicle. Because I think that's what the state law was authorizing us to do, if I'm reading it right.
Well, we're happy to work with you all on that, so.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Are there any other questions from committee before we just do? Okay, well, thank you again so very much for your presentation. I think we're going to take a 2-minute recess and then we'll come back for public comment.
Well, thank you very
Thank
much
you
for your
all.
time.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Sure. Yeah. Wonderful.
We didn't even call everybody in. We had,
I'm sorry.
the right people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, all right.
I just wanted to make sure.
Remember what we talked?
Yes.
That's all. I'll use this.
She was gonna be different. She worked
Sure. Will you be looking to see that? Yes. Pero como quiera es fuerte.
Well, they need some kind of special purpose. Figure out how to help with it. I mean, they might use their discretion. But it should be, they should, yeah.
What happened on Wednesday? Everybody okay?
Not yet.
Yeah, so you saw. Oh.
No, she's not, no, no. She's over it.
I'm pretty much to get through, but I'm not good enough to enjoy it. That's why this process is so hard. So it's good to have all.
Any, sense of what they're trying to But it's their own community.
There were some interesting articles talking this you know, in the great hospital scheme of what they have to do, you know, there are areas of shootings and sexual assaults, all that kind of stuff. Driving accidents. So we don't have yeah. You know, we have Congress.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening. Thank you so much for waiting. At this time, we are going to open it up to public comment. And I just want to make one quick announcement before we begin. We have a number of folks on the list. You know, I think this Board of Alders, all of my colleagues are clear in our understanding of the difficulties around noise and how we enforce noise in the city. But I want to be clear that tonight, public testimony must remain germane to the item in front of us, which is specifically about these motorized vehicles with amplification devices for noise. And I think at some point in the future, we will reconvene this body at perhaps a workshop to talk about noise more broadly. But I appreciate you and I thank you for being here, that we're going to be quite narrow. So at this time, I'm going to call forward Joe Paqueta. In the interest of time, I'm going to ask the folks please keep their testimony to 3 minutes or less. Please state your name and address for the record.
Joe Paqueta, 27 Adeline Street, New Haven.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Yes, thank you very much. Does anybody know how many noise ordinance violation tickets were issued last year? Does anybody have a number? Okay, probably very few. Okay, so you can raise the fines to $1 million, but if there's no enforcement, then it's just a farce. One of dozens about New Haven, unfortunately, and it will continue to be ignored by the violators. Like a friend of mine and I have completed 120 architectural historic tours of 100 cities and towns in the state. So we have somewhat become experts on Connecticut, and sadly, my impression is that New Haven is the dirtiest, trash-filled city in the state, and by far the noisiest. I live in the Hill, and it is plagued by juvenile adult men in their 20s through their 50s who drive around compulsively demonstrating their music file from their cars to very expensive, very powerful sound systems. I'm not sure what their motivations are. Perhaps they're peacocking to attract a female who will have sex with them, or if they're selling drugs or just having fun being rude and obnoxious. This has been a problem here for 2 decades, and it is one of the reasons people move out of the city. The loud, vulgar, and obnoxious music is impossible to ignore and exhausting to cope with. The style and form of their music changes constantly, but the volume remains the same and degrades the quality of life here and prevents New Haven from being a truly great city. The police do not have the personnel to give out tickets to whoever makes violations. They are too busy coping with gang and drug-related violence, domestic abuse issues, and car break-ins, etc., etc., etc. However, there is another approach, similar to what Bridgeport utilizes on their school buses. Bridgeport has an agreement with a company that installed cameras on their buses for free in exchange for keeping the fines. Maybe a similar arrangement can be implemented on police cars, which would record the volume of the music and the license plate of the car, thereby eliminating any direct conflict with the violator and potential violence. Or hire 2 off-duty police officers to drive around the Hill, downtown, Dixwell, New Hallville, and Fairhaven once or twice a month on random days in a civilian car to record violations and directly issue $1,000 tickets. I came up with the $1,000 number before any of you did. If you choose this method, inform the residents of New Haven through a series of robocalls that this is the new reality. Also, call West Haven because the town and their police department have for decades successfully repressed audio noise along the beach.
Mr. Brigada, your time is up.
Okay? They can inform and advise about what they have done
Mr. Brigada,
right.
thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Are there any questions from committee? Seeing none, thank you. We're gonna go to Gloria Bellacchio. Good evening. Thank you for being here. Please know that we're going to limit testimony to 3 minutes.
I don't have a lot to say.
And please just state your name and address for the record.
It's Gloria Bellacchio, and my address is 300 Lighthouse Road. I don't have anything prepared. I just this music is crazy loud. It vibrates my entire house, shakes the windows, disrupts my entire family. Woke me up at 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm a 20. Sorry. Okay. Well, last week somebody was driving around the neighborhood with a speaker attached to their car. That was disruptive, but I was too tired to get out of bed to see the license plate or whatever. But on May 27th, 1 o'clock in the morning, I was woken up. I waited an hour before it. I couldn't take it anymore. The whole house shaking, the dog's awake, my husband's awake, who's very sick. I called the New Haven Police Department an hour later, and within a half an hour, they were able to find the people, shut it down, and I finally got some sleep. That is until 6:30 when Avella took off for the first flight of the day. But you guys have to put more fines, do whatever you need to do to stop these people, because their object isn't to listen to music, to enjoy music. It's to purposely disrupt, annoy other people in the neighborhoods. I'm across the water. I don't think they realize. People in Branford on the next door neighbor asking where the music's coming from. They cannot believe that it's coming from Lone Wharf area. I'm like, that's where it's coming from. So whatever you guys can do to help, to make my quality of life, I just want to live in peace. That's it. Sorry.
Thank you so much. Any questions from committee?
I have a question, Madam Chair. Thank you so much for your testimony. So you said that you waited an hour.
Yes.
And then it was remedied within 30 minutes.
About then, yeah. I guess I had several calls on it, so they were working on it.
Great.
But I tried to give the people, the benefit of the doubt. Maybe, they didn't get the volume right, or maybe I can go back to sleep. Maybe I can sleep through this. It was impossible. Things vibrating in my house. I don't have a basement, so I feel everything on my granite. So I tried to help them out a little bit, but I can't deal with it. It's been consistent for years now. So,
Thank you.
Do
Thank
more.
you for your testimony.
thanks, appreciate it.
At this time, we'll have Eric Kelly. Is Eric Kelly here? One more time for Eric Kelly. Moving on to Sam City. Good evening. Please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Sam Sig. I live at 932 Townsend Avenue in New Haven. First of all, I want to thank you alders for having this hearing, for considering this ordinance. I want to especially thank Chief Lieutenant McDermott, Chief Jacobson, and Mayor Elliker, who've been extremely helpful to us. They've literally kept us from going insane by helping to facilitate stopping this activity when possible. And I can assure you that it's extremely detrimental to the quality of life of all the residents in wards 17 and 18, among other wards. you can't escape it. I think that's been made pretty clear. It's low-frequency sound waves, travel long distances, they go through material. We've all had stopped at a red light and had a car, 5 cars behind us, boom, 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 and then stuff on our own dashboard is vibrating. But then it goes away. 30 seconds later, the light, and this goes on for hours and hours sometimes. You literally cannot escape it. You can go to your basement. I can go to bed at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. Sometimes I have to get up at 4 in the morning, can't go to sleep. Stuff cotton in your ears, AC on, can't go to sleep. You can still feel it and hear it. It's way beyond a neighborhood disturbance. I think that's been made pretty clear by the presentation. I would urge you to think about including not just the external speakers, because it's the entire vehicle. I've documented this many, many times since 2001 with photos and with video. I've been threatened, I've been given the finger, I've had my car driven at high speed to intimidate me because they know what I'm doing. I'm reporting it to the police. And some of those vehicles it's totally integrated. You know, they lift up the hatch, open the doors, 27 speakers, 130 decibels. Jet engine level sound coming from one vehicle is what we're talking about. It's unbelievable. We live 1.25 miles away, and the incident starts, your quality of life goes down the drain. You can't think or do anything else except be bothered by this intrusion. I liken it to toxic smoke. It's like someone in the ward next to your ward is lighting a fire with toxic materials, and the smoke is drifting over your neighborhood, and you can't escape it. It goes in your window, you breathe it, you can't get away from it, and they do it over and over every weekend. More, and you're like, what? How is this possible? Why aren't they? And they're doing everything they can. So I urge you, please give them the tools they need to make this super deterrent and end it so that the word spreads and then just is not coming back to anywhere in Connecticut. It's just too much for people to endure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sick. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you. And we're going to move to Thomasine Shaw. Is Thomasine Shaw here? Oh, my apologies. Good evening.
Good evening.
Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Thomasine Shaw. I live at 188 Howard Avenue, New Haven. And I'm here because, yes, we have problems with noise. I live in the Long Wharf area that seems to get all the blame. And I want to say right now, stop it. There are other areas that are to blame as well. You know, and just because that's part of the Hill doesn't mean that we're all responsible for this. But I want to go back a little. We have had a noise ordinance for some time. The state of Connecticut in its general statutes has noise level, I don't know what they call it, from every municipality in this state. And anything over whatever that noise level is for that particular area was supposed to be summoned or I guess we were, or the city was supposed to be handling that. And in the beginning, and I want to say, when was it? Back in, oh God, well, the early part of the century, we did, or when I say we, because I am New Haven, I'm a part of New Haven. But I do want to say that in the beginning, efforts were made to obey, or I should say, to enforce the ordinance, noise ordinance.
Ms. Shaw, I apologize, but I'm wondering if your testimony is specific to the issue at hand rather than just.
I want to get to that if you don't mind.
Sure.
So I get 2 more seconds because of that. But I do want to say that when that ordinance was being handled, it was like, oh, I don't know, a fad. You worked on it, and then after so long, nothing. Okay, you did nothing to enforce the ordinance. If you have an ordinance now, I want you to enforce it. Okay, don't treat it like a fad. I want to hold you responsible, and I want clear information. The city should have clear information as to how these things are being handled. All right, don't just, say, oh yeah, we do this for a year, then all of a sudden, oh, we don't have to do it anymore. Yes, you do. And then also take care of our little noise problems too, because you seem to think that it's of no consequence. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from committee? Seeing none, we're going to move on to Claudia Rivera.
Hello, Claudia Rivera, 15 Castle Street. Please proceed. Thank you. I just want to make you aware that yes, the cars around, they're passing, they have it. But I also would like to take paying attention to what we reported when we see the cars actually being built. I've been having several of my neighbors, friends, they say, Claudia, I know where are they. I call the police and they said they cannot do anything about it because it's inside the house, and we start with the problem with the zoning. We need to address this as a precaution before they actually been built in the road. This is quality of life aggravation, quality of life insult, babies insulted, and we use it also to bully people around. Is somebody there to speak about the problem with the police, the authority, or anybody else? The person got bullied, the person got attacked, and that cannot be being seen like they be treated with no consequences. I urge you, to all of you, they approve what need to be approved with the proper precautions. They definitely hear you, that they need to be efficient. They need to be proactive. And please remember, like I say, quality of life is a big umbrella, but it is still talking about safety. If we report that we know where these cars being built, if there is a problem that we cannot go in the house because zoning, LCR or whatever, we need to address that. How we can prevent to actually that car be able to run and make the noise. That's all I have. Thank you.
Are there any questions from committee? All right. Moving on to Richard Buckholz.
Good evening.
Good evening. Please state your name and address for the record.
Richard Buckholz, 108 Neeland Road.
Please proceed.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me time to discuss an issue that has plagued my family and many of my neighbors and their families for years. Unfortunately, there are no laws about being inconsiderate to others. The issue at hand has created such frustration and aggravation for me and my family, as we have been disruptive on many, many occasions at midnight, 2 o'clock, 3:30. It just goes on and on. This has literally been for years. And while I have faith, actually great faith, in the New Haven Police Department and greatly appreciate their efforts over the years, they really need your support in enabling all of us to get this situation under control. I was born and raised here in New Haven, and I love this city. It saddens me to know that neither my son or daughters have any desire to make New Haven their home. I pray my wife and I can remain here for many more years to come. And that is contingent upon improving the quality of life for all of us. So please put your support behind this amendment to make life better for all New Haveners.
Thank you, Mr. Buckles. Are there any questions from the committee? Thank you so much for your testimony.
Thank you.
At this time, I'm going to call forward Chris Avalon.
Good evening. Thank you for holding this very, very important hearing.
If you would please state your name and
Certainly.
address.
My name is Christopher Avalone, 610 Townsend Avenue.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for addressing this issue. It has been going on for a very, very long time, and it is extremely disruptive. I'm sure at one point that you have been woken up at 2 or 3 in the morning, and especially when you have to get up the next day to get to work, it's extremely difficult. It disrupts your whole day. It disrupts your quality of life. When you're out trying to enjoy the peaceful serenity of your backyard, and then you're forced to go inside, and you can't even retreat from it when you go inside. It's so piercingly loud. The low frequency bass vibrations that come over, that get amplified over the harbor to the East Shore area. And I'm so grateful of all the other residents from other areas of New Haven that have come out today that are experiencing the harmful effects of this public nuisance. It needs to be addressed. We need a better quality of life. There's just no reason for this continuous disruption. So I implore all of you to do your part to pass this amendment, to get a handle on this. I think it could be easily nipped. If we get these fines increased, the word will spread and send a message that they cannot come here from other states knowing that they're going to be left alone, or a very paltry fine is going to be issued to them of $100. Please address this so that we can all enjoy our life. I lived here. I was born and raised in New Haven. My wife and I moved away out to Litchfield County. We came back because I love the city. I think it's a jewel. And let's make it be that way. Thank you for your efforts. Truly appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Avalon. Are there any questions for everybody? Thank you so much. So that's the last name on my list up here, but I will call if there's any member of the public wishing to testify on this item, please come forward. And the second time, any members of the public who are wishing to testify on this item, please come forward. And a third time, if there are any members of the public wishing to come forward or to testify, please come forward. Seeing none, a motion is appropriate.
I move to close
Second.
public portion of the hearing.
Second.
The item is moved in second. Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? New sentence? The ayes have it. So now we'll move into discussion of the item.
Madam Chair, I move the item.
So I hear a second?
Second.
Item is moved in second. Discussion.
Madam Chair, I move that we adopt the newly revised version. So I move this item by substitution.
Second.
The item is moved in second. Discussion on the substitution. Alder Furley.
But there's been some numerous changes, and colleagues would note, and I'm just kind of imitating my colleague from the 25th Ward. But if colleagues would note the red line version that we have before us, and so this is the version that we will be discussing tonight.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Alder Stevens.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just want to say, I think as we've discussed tonight, I will hold my comments for it, but thank you.
So we amended by substitution. So we need to vote on that and go back to the item.
Alder Rashan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wish to speak in favor of the substitute amendment. And it includes two sets of changes. One that is indicated in the big packet, in the back of the big packet. And another that includes the two changes that are discussed in the smaller packet that we got today. Some of it is just wording changes to be more precise. There's a change in regards to what the appropriate legal standard for ruling that property is forfeit. But the one that we heard described by Attorney King is the decision to go with the Hartford distance standard of 100 feet as opposed to 50 feet. And so those are some of the changes that the administration is requesting we make to the amendment that they submitted to us. And I am certainly supportive of those additional changes, and I encourage colleagues to vote yes to support the substitute amendment. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, we will vote on the item as the substituted. I got it. Thank you. The item is substituted. All those in favor of substitution, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Any abstaining? The ayes have it. So we are back to the item as amended. Discussion. Alder Sabin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As we've discussed tonight, I think there are some additional changes that we'll work with Corporation Council and the Police Department to make sure that the ordinance before us is aligned with the state law that we're attempting to align with. I think, though, obviously, the public hearing testimony was overwhelmingly in support of us making this change to address the very clear issues that we're experiencing in the city. I think we definitely want to commend the Corporation Council's office and the city police department for working on this, residents for coming out and sticking through a long night of discussion and testimony. So I think we'll work on those changes and hopefully can make them on the floor, and we'll be able to make this important change for our residents. Thank you.
Alder Rashan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wish to speak in favor of the ordinance amendment for the reason that I believe that the phenomenon it's attempting to address is a very real, bothersome, and worse than bothersome phenomenon. It's creating public health problems for residents. And it actually is very serious. And I commend the police department and our Corporation Counsel's office for taking the initiative to adopt changes that the state has now allowed us to make. I do want to express some concerns, which I believe can be addressed between now and the second reading. And so I agree with my colleague from the 7th Ward and his sentiment that hopefully that work can be done. But my concerns are these. In addition to the one that Alder Sabin mentioned about whether or not the larger fines would apply to a violation of the ordinance that has nothing to do with amplified sound and these speakers, we just need to fact check that, because we may need 2 different sets of fines to stay within the authorization given to us by the state. And I believe that should be checked out. But the other thing I think we need to consider is the perhaps unintended consequences down the road of creating a fairly low threshold coupled with potentially very high consequences. Now, what do I mean by that? I am not referring to those egregious examples of loud noise that residents complained about, because I believe that high fines and potential seizures for those kinds of infractions are warranted. But what if you have a busted muffler that you haven't gotten fixed yet? And you can be heard 100 feet away from your vehicle. Let's say you just park somewhere and you're idling for a few minutes, right? This is a scenario that maybe wouldn't happen because the police have so much better things to do with their time than to ticket someone for a muffler. But under the ordinance, as it is currently proposed to us, it would be possible to impose some pretty severe consequences for something that's not the egregious example that is highlighted on our screen here. So we write laws and we amend laws, and we have to think not just about what the intention is, but what might some of the unintended consequences be. And I believe we just need to consider those and perhaps adopt a few clarifications or guardrails to do that. I'm also open to the possibility that maybe our well-considered opinion is we want a low threshold because we want the city police department to deal with this egregious issue first, but then to go to the next one, and then the next one, and then the next one. But let's just be sure that that's what we want to do before we amend the ordinance in a way that would enable them to do that without any further authorization from us. So I just want to encourage us to think through that a little bit and perhaps discuss with our colleagues in the Corporation Counsel's office if there's ways to address those concerns. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Alder, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. What I like and I can respect is that it looks like there's a nice plan put in effect to make this happen so that we could not only improve the ordinance, but also meet the law of the state. We have the cameras that are going to complement the effort where there could be documentation and data collection, which hopefully can help our police department. And also the seizing of these noise items, including these big speakers, and also addressing where they would be stored or what would happen so as to protect issues of damaging and all of that. So it looks like our police department has thought a well plan to address, and what I like the most is that our chief was present and he indicated that we'll work with this big problem and hopefully work to improve and address the issues at the street level regarding our basic fundamental noise ordinances. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Alder Frillo and then Alder Sagan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's good to point out that this ordinance has also had support from our colleagues from Ward 12, Alder Antunes, our colleague from Ward 13, Alder Santana, a member of this committee, Ward 17, Alder Punzo, and Ward 18, Alder Cola, who are in support of this. I typically do not like for legislation to leave committee and work on it on the floor. It gets messy. And it puts a tremendous burden upon the chair to collect all the information and make sure that everything is done correctly. But after hearing the public testimony, and I should say in the beginning that I am in favor of this ordinance as amended. After hearing the public testimony, I am in favor of giving this a favorable vote to leave committee and go to the floor, because this is going to have a first and second reading because this ordinance amendment. We are in summer session, which means that this will not be heard by the board until August. After it is passed in August, if my numbers are right, it takes about 30 days additionally for the law to come into effect after, depending upon the time that the city town clerk notices this. And this means that it's going to go again through another summer with our residents having to endure this noise. And so it is my hope that we will be able to work together over the next couple of months to make sure that this ordinance is tight, so that we will be able to have a firm ordinance to vote on in our August meeting. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to clarify that I'm speaking in favor of the ordinance, and I wanted to echo what my colleague from Ward 25 said, which is that I think I maybe have some hesitations about the way that the ordinance is written currently with the very broad application that we maybe could see. So I think, I think it makes sense to support it now, but with the hope that it will be amended to align with the goals of what we've been discussing here tonight and with what the public testimony has been about related to the specific issue that we're dealing with, which is obviously causing a huge amount of problems for residents. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Alter statement.
Apologies, Madam Chair. I just wanted to also note that we did receive letter support from Representative Palo and Senator Looney, who are also in support of the ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm in support of this ordinance, and I appreciate the comments from my colleague from Ward 25 and my colleague from Ward 7 about unintended consequences, but I do believe it seems that it is clear. I live on Brown Street, so I live not far from Long Wharf, and I regularly hear these spaceships, as Alder affectionately call them, and I don't know if folks know, I have two small children, one just turned 1, and it is really hard to get a 1-year-old to sleep after she's woken up by one of these. And so I think, particularly in terms of quality of life, it's really important that we address this. But I also hear my colleagues, and I would ask that city staff perhaps begin look at the questions that were asked and connect with Corp Council and the chief and lieutenant. But with no further discussion, we will vote on the item. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The ayes have it. And at this point, Alder Rishon.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
It has been moved and second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any nays, any abstentions? Thank you so much for hanging with us tonight. We are adjourned.
Okay. Light work.
Okay, how are you? No, only. Thank you.
We can always change our mind too. That's it. Like you can make a motion.
Hey, we're happy to work with you. You can read these things a million times, and you don't see a forest for the trees sometimes, but we're happy to work with you, so just reach out, whatever.